Our next speaker is Bob Steele. Bob is Vice Chairman of an international marketing agency and has been on the board of directors of numerous companies, including the American Stock Exchange. Bob's a graduate of Amherst College and Columbia University. He served with the CIA and in Congress and was a candidate for governor of Connecticut. He comes to us this evening to speak about Connecticut's experience with casino gambling. Now, Bob has authored a book called The Curse, Big Time Gambling, Seduction of a Small New England Town. Sound like us? I read the book. I was just absolutely amazed and actually spooked by how relevant it is to what we're going through here right now. It's amazing if you get a chance to read the book. Actually, Bob has some over there, and they're also available on Amazon and other electronic media. I recommend strongly that you read it because it's not just facts and figures. What it's about is a novel that incorporates those facts and figures and what happened in Connecticut into the story of what a family went through. I've read it, and it's a worthwhile read. Right now, I'd like to introduce Bob to tell us what happened in Connecticut.
Thank you, Steve. I'm not sure that is on.
That's okay.
Y'all hear me? Yes. All right, good. Well, thank you very much, Steve, and thank all of you for inviting me to Milford tonight. And thank you for your interest in my book, which is The Curse, Big Time Gambling Seduction of a Small New England Town. The book is a novel set against the explosion of casino gambling in Connecticut during the 1990s. The book starts with the Pequot War back in the 1600s, and the Connecticut colonists, all of whom came from Boston, living up and down the Connecticut River precariously, got together with their Mohegan allies and almost annihilated the Pequots as a tribe. The Pequots at that time were the most powerful and the largest tribe in Connecticut. The story then jumps some 350 years as these two tribes, the Mashantucket Pequots and the Mohegans, re-emerge under the law to build the world's two biggest casinos in the southeastern part of our state. And in the story, a Connecticut family becomes embroiled in a battle to stop a third casino that threatens the family's town and ancestral home. The Curse, in sum, in the end, is about a small, quintessential New England town that must choose between conserving its values and an enormously seductive proposal that will change the town forever. The Curse, in sum, is a novel set against the factual background of what happened to us in Connecticut. And perhaps I should start by just giving you just a tiny bit of my own background. I did represent Eastern Connecticut in Congress during the 1970s. I left Congress to run unsuccessfully for governor of Connecticut. After that, I left politics, and my family and I moved to Ledyard, Connecticut. We lived 21 years on the edge of the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation. And those two experiences, knowing the political background of Eastern Connecticut and seeing firsthand the impact of the casinos on our area, gave me the equivalent of a front row seat for watching these developments. Now, while the casino proposed for Milford is not an Indian casino, nonetheless it's being proposed by an Indian casino tribe. And it is worth mentioning, just briefly, the importance and the role of Indian casinos in leading to the explosion of casino gambling that's now sweeping into Massachusetts. Indian casinos got their start exactly 25 years ago. This is the 25th anniversary of Congress passing something called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. which was designed to help poor, federally recognized Indian tribes build casinos on their reservations in order to raise money to support their tribal governments. It'd be fair to say, however, that Congress had absolutely no idea of the Pandora's box it was opening when it passed this law. As it turned out, the law not only opened the door to Indian casinos, but spurred the legalization and the building of non-Indian, so-called commercial casinos across the country as well. Back in 1988, only 2 states allowed casinos. Nevada, obviously with Las Vegas, and New Jersey with Atlantic City. Today, 39 states allow casinos, and the country is literally awash in casinos. Nowhere, though, was casino gambling introduced with more spectacular results than in the state of Connecticut. Foxwoods opened back in 1992, and Mohegan Sun opened 7 miles away 4 years later in 1996. They were the first casinos on the entire East Coast other than in Atlantic City. And with no competition, they quickly grew into the 2 largest casinos on the planet, not just in the United States, on the planet, drawing over half their customers from other states, mainly New York and Massachusetts, creating some 20,000 casino jobs and sending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to the state treasury in Hartford. Now, Massachusetts officials have repeatedly cited these spectacular numbers to justify legalizing casino gambling in Massachusetts. But one has to wonder how closely Massachusetts has looked at the downside of Connecticut's casinos, and especially at what has been happening in Connecticut lately. The casino's presence has created a pervasive gambling culture in southeastern Connecticut. They've sharply skewed our economy toward low-paying service jobs, and they've resulted in a sharp spike in the number of Connecticut residents seeking treatment for gambling addiction. Traffic overwhelmed our local roads. Drunk driving arrests in nearby Norwich more than doubled, and the annual number of calls to the Ledyard police more than quadrupled. In order to handle the influx of immigrants seeking casino jobs, the Norwich school system had to create what is called an ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Languages, a program for some 400 students who spoke collectively over 27 different languages. One of the most remarkable findings from a state of Connecticut-sponsored study in 2009 was that since the 2 casinos had opened, there had been a 400% increase in the number of arrests for embezzlement in Connecticut, a rate of increase over 10 times the national average. In fact, my tax collector in Ledyard was one of the embezzlers. She stole $302,000 in order to play the slots at Foxwoods. And of course, she didn't win. And I never knew whether my tax receipts were part of that or not. The number of embezzlements in southeastern Connecticut has become so great that a columnist for the New London Day, our lead newspaper, has described southeastern Connecticut as the embezzlement capital of America. Now, according to the National Council on Problem Gambling, about 3 million American adults are pathological gamblers. That means they have the worst, highest level of addiction. They cannot control their gambling. Another 6 to 9 million American adults are so-called problem gamblers, just a little less addiction. And another 15 million Americans are at risk for developing gambling addiction as legalized gambling continues to spread across the country. As far back as 1997, and I was out of Congress by that time, Congress became so concerned about what it had done in opening the door to this casino explosion that it set up a national commission to study the problem. Based on its findings, the commission recommended that there be a moratorium on the building of new casinos in the United States until the federal government could get a better handle on the social and economic costs. In addition, the commission recommended that we ban credit card and ATM use at casinos, prohibit aggressive casino advertising, and restrict political contributions by the gambling industry in order to guard against political corruption. But those recommendations were never implemented. And as I've suggested, the number of casinos, now at almost 1,000 across the United States, has continued to multiply. In the meantime, the casino industry and casino opponents have fought what I would call a pitched battle over whether casinos are good or bad for our society. The casinos, and you've heard this argument over and over now already, these casinos have now become a $63 billion industry and one of the most powerful political groups in the United States. They argue that casinos spur economic growth, create jobs, increase entertainment options, and provide states and municipalities with much needed revenue. But as you would suspect, the opponents argue just the opposite. First, they point out that gambling is addictive for millions of people, that casinos prey on pathological, problem, and frequent gamblers for up to 80% of their profits, and that gambling addiction leads to debt, bankruptcies, broken families, and crime. They're especially critical of slot machines, which typically produce about 3/4 of a casino's revenue, and are viewed as the most addictive form of gambling at a physical casino. In fact, a new book entitled Addiction by Design by a brilliant MIT professor named Natasha Schull makes the case that today's slot machines are far more addictive than almost any of us ever realized. The book documents in dramatic detail how today's slots are the result of exhaustive corporate research designed to keep players playing as long as possible and maximize what the industry, what the industry calls time on device, in order to extract as much money as possible from each player. Second, opponents contend that individuals aren't the only ones being hooked on gambling. In addition, they say that state governments are becoming so dependent on gambling revenue that in an almost Orwellian twist, they become partners of the casinos in promoting predatory gambling and using addictive machines in order to squeeze money out of their citizens. Third, opponents say that casinos constitute a regressive tax on low-income people who can afford to lose the money the least. Fourth, they totally reject out of hand the idea that casinos are effective economic development tools. In Connecticut's case, they point out casinos have done little or nothing to create spin-off businesses, but instead have cannibalized existing businesses and have left people with less money to spend on other goods and services. There's one local restaurant owner who initially was enormously excited about Mohegan Sun coming into Montville, said, the casino customers drive to the casinos, they play at the casinos, they go to the shows at the casinos, they eat at the casino restaurants, they stay at the casino hotels, they fill up their gas tanks at the casino gas stations, and drive home. And finally, opponents say there is no evidence that casinos ultimately strengthen a state's or a town's finances. Connecticut, they note, has now taken in over $6 billion. That's billion with a B. Over $6 billion in shared slot revenues over the last 19 to 20 years. And yet Connecticut today is in the worst financial shape in its history, with the highest debt per capita, the highest unfunded liabilities of any state in the United States. Moreover, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis recently cited Connecticut as the only state in the United States to have negative economic growth last year. And you know the one county in Connecticut that had the worst record?
Norwich.
London County, where the casinos are. Now, economist Earl Grinnells, who is the leading independent analyst of impacts on areas of casinos, go so far as to estimate that the cost to benefit ratio of introducing a casino into an area like Milford, like your area, is at least 3 to 1. That is, the costs on a long-term basis outweigh the benefits by at least 3 to 1. Now, to be honest, the cost to benefit ratio to us in Connecticut has undoubtedly been better than that, because of all the people who come from other states, leave their money in Connecticut, and then take their problems home with them. But the question now for us in Connecticut is how long that monopoly that has allowed Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods to do that is going to last. And clearly that monopoly is ending. Maine now has its first 2 casinos. Rhode Island just converted one of its 2 slot parlors into a full-scale casino. New York State, which allows extensive electronic casino gambling, is in the process of amending its state constitution to permit the building of up to 7 new full-scale commercial casinos across New York State. And I don't have to tell you what is happening here in Massachusetts with the 3 mega casinos that are proposed. I certainly don't want to leave out the slots parlor. As a result of the recession and growing competition now, particularly from Rhode Island and Aqueduct and Yonkers racetracks in New York, Connecticut's casino revenue is already down 32% in the last 5 years, down from a peak of $430 million to under $300 million. Layoffs at both Connecticut casinos have begun. The casinos are increasingly turning to part-time jobs in order to reduce wages and to cut benefits. And Foxwoods, as you know, is deeply in debt because of gross overexpansion. The same downward trend is happening all over the United States, and is especially pronounced here in the Northeast. In Delaware, the governor of Delaware has proposed giving Delaware's 3 casinos $8 million to forestall layoffs. I mean, the money, they told you, is supposed to go the other way, as I recall. In Atlantic City casino revenue is down 44% in the last 5 years. And the newest and greatest and most spectacular casino resort on the East Coast, the Revel, or as they call it, just Revel in Atlantic City, which opened in 2012, just filed for bankruptcy. Just one more casualty for a community that bet its future on casino gambling. As a former New Jersey representative, state representative, who was described himself as a refugee from New Jersey, put it, we were promised a glittering jewel when they wanted to bring gambling into Atlantic City. But what we got was a glitzy strip surrounded by a slum. Now, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun say they plan to fight all this competition by upgrading their properties and re-emphasizing in their marketing the fact they are destination resorts in order to continue to pull people from Massachusetts and New York and Maine and everywhere else in the Northeast. But I think you'll agree that it's very, very unlikely that many Bostonians or New Yorkers are going to continue getting in their cars and driving all the way to Eastern Connecticut to gamble if they've got a brand new state-of-the-art casino in their own backyard. Instead, it seems likely that Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun will have to increasingly turn inward to attract more and more people to come on in and play from New London and Ledyard and Thompson and Putnam and Willimantic and all of our towns throughout Connecticut in order to keep full these enormous gambling complexes we've created. And that, of course, means more problems for Connecticut. Now, some of you in the audience may shake your heads or shrug your shoulders and say, well, too bad for Connecticut. But it's very difficult to believe that your experience here in Massachusetts is going to be any different. Massachusetts casinos and new casinos may choose to call themselves destination resorts or anything else they choose to call themselves, but the fact is most casinos outside of Las Vegas appear destined to become convenience casinos for local people. As a result, a Milford casino can expect, based on our experience in Connecticut, the great overwhelming majority of its customers to come from close by rather than from other places in New England or New York. There's also, in closing, I want to say another lesson that we're learning in Connecticut that you might want to consider. And that is, once casino revenue starts dropping, and it will, unless you are totally different than every other place in the United States, what you can expect from your state is to try to replace that revenue with more gambling. Connecticut's response to its declining casino revenue has been to increase the casino's free play allowance so they can beef up their promotions and attract in more people. And the state of Connecticut has now begun to put itself into the casino gambling business. For starters, Connecticut just a couple of months ago legalized Keno for our restaurants, bars, and taverns. And then the next day, legislative leaders proposed putting video slots, the most sophisticated kind of slot machine, into our OTB parlors, so we have slot parlors across the state of Connecticut. All of these moves pale, however, compared to what our state appears to have in store for us next. Nevada and New Jersey earlier this year approved in-state online gambling for their casinos. And our governor is on record as saying that if other states do that, then Connecticut has to follow suit in order to protect our casinos. You can imagine what the sequence will be here in Massachusetts. And of course the casinos want this desperately because they're hurting now and they believe that online gambling, if they can run the book, so to speak, will greatly expand their audience and especially expand their access to young people. And the experts are particularly concerned because they view online gambling as the most addictive form of gambling because of the instant gratification aspect of online play, its 24-hour availability, and the rapid pace of play. As one expert commented, legalizing online gambling will be the equivalent of opening a 24-hour casino in every house, every apartment, and every dorm room in the state of Connecticut. So in other words, having brought physical casinos into Connecticut, it now looks like we're going to have no choice but to legalize internet gambling. The whole history, and that I want to say, that is a very daunting prospect for those of us in Connecticut who think we already have enough gambling. In fact, the entire remarkable story of casino gambling in Connecticut is enough to want to write a book. Thanks very much.
Now, as that famous radio announcer once said, now that's the other side of the story. We want to respect everybody's time, and we have another couple of speakers. And so I'm going to say we'll take 5 questions, and we ask you please to be brief and give your question, and then let Bob handle it. And I will try to get as far as I can from here with this mic, but we don't have Foxwood's budget for good equipment, so you may have to come up here. Sir?
I'm not sure the question can be answered, but I listen and I read in the paper, they're going to give us $20 million a year, they're going to give us $20 million up front from a corporation that's $1 billion in debt. My question really is, we're giving a permission for a casino owned and run by a tribe. If that tribe comes into Massachusetts, is here for a number of years, as they were in Michigan, and decides that this is now going to be a reservation, what do we have to do to stop that?
Well,
That would free them from paying taxes.
right now, under practice, they could not make that decision. However, I have to tell you that the new leadership in the Bureau of Indian Affairs has just proposed new rules which would greatly relax requirements for an Indian tribe to open a casino. The new rule that is proposed is that the tribe need only show that its reservation was in operation in 1934. But I don't think that the scenario that you just painted under the law or regulations could happen at the present time.
Someone else?
Hello. Could you speak to the property values and taxes over time? Property values and taxes over time since before the casino and currently as compared to other towns that don't have this near them? And also, do you get a payment from the tribe every year? Thank you.
Well, as you know, the tribe's enterprises on the reservation don't pay any state taxes, have no obligation to obey zoning laws or building laws. They pay no state, no town property taxes, etc. Individual tribal members do pay federal income taxes for the money they receive. Now, you asked specifically about real estate values, and I wish I could answer that question better. The problem is that the tribe went from 16 people to 900 people, and as they brought people in, they were buying up properties. So it was a very non-traditional situation. Moreover, there haven't been any studies on the Ledyard Montville areas on that. However, I can tell you that in my big neighborhood, that property values went down approximately 15 to 20% over the next 6 years at a time when real estate was recovering in the rest of the country.
We have 3 more questions, possibly here.
I don't know how many people are aware, but one of the things that has been cited is that Milford has proposed other ways of developing business in Milford. And it seems like we're mesmerized by get-rich-quick, I think. The other thing that really bothers me as an educator over more than 30 years is the percentage of education in this country that is being paid for by gaming is astounding. And another reason that Milford has to stand up is because even if all these things don't happen, we're saying, oh, we don't have the intelligence, the creativity, whatever, to bring in other kinds of business that will be profitable. Has Connecticut gone in that direction at all?
Well, as I said, Connecticut is in the worst financial shape in its history. It's got a very serious jobs problem. The worst counties in London County where the casinos are. We had our time when the casinos were first coming in, when they were hiring all these people, that they were contributing. And I have no doubt, and I want to say that I have no doubt that a Milford casino in the first year would probably be a great success. That's not your concern. The concern is what happens the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. Because what we've seen is now, with the layoffs that are coming, and with the reductions in employment, and with the reductions in contributions to the state, we've now had 20 straight months of lower slot machine revenue. 20 straight months. And now all the statistics are on the downside and are pushing the London County down, down, down. And that, I think, is what you can expect here. But I want to be clear. I mean, if it is built here and you see the first year and you say, gee, what were they talking about? This thing is great. Give it a few years.
Yes.
2 more questions.
Thank you. It's not a question, sir, but more of a response to the young lady about whether or not Milford would be able to attract business by any other means. We've been there and we've done that. The question is, can the site of solid granite be used? That's been raised in the discussions. In I believe it was 1979 and 1980, after we lost 3,500 jobs, or 3,000 jobs when Rockwell International closed its doors, Milford did embark on a very novel way of bringing business to Milford. Under Massachusetts General Law 121A, we negotiated tax agreements with businesses if they would locate in Milford. We were able to do that because the site is exactly like the one that's being proposed, solid granite. And we were able to develop over 100 acres. We replaced the 3,500 jobs. Actually, we created approximately 10,000 jobs. The problem with the casino, and I'd be very brief on this, trying to be anyway, the problem with casinos is that good, decent, ordinary people have to lose so they can make profits. You have to lose. There's a scene in the movie Casino where Bob De Niro says, after a millionaire won $3 million, something happened to his plane, and he had to continue playing, and he lost it all. And Bob De Niro said, see, if we keep them here long enough, we get it all back. It's bad business for Milford. The glowing promises made by the casino developers will be funded by the losses at the gaming tables, the slot machines, and the all-day drinking. You can go there and drink all day long for $1 a drink. And I don't think we need those problems here in Milford. Thank you.
One last question right here.
The advertisements in favor of the casino promise greater revenue for this town, but what guarantee is there? Do they have any evidence to back it up? How can average citizens like us be certain that the profits from the casinos will come back to us? They won't just simply be kept and hoarded by the government, the state officials, or whoever makes that profit from the casino.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So here's a quick question for the audience. There's a community in Milford, there's a community in Massachusetts with a population of about 28,000 people, and they're being confronted by $1 billion resort casino. And what community am I talking about? No, I am talking about Milford, but I'm also talking about West Springfield. They were offered $25 million a year, just like Milford. Their town fathers signed their host agreement, just like Milford. They are 28,000 people in their town, just like Milford. And 2 weeks ago, they resoundingly said, no casino in West Springfield. We fortunately have the leader of the anti-casino movement in West Springfield, Alan Cabot, here to tell us some insights and some words. Alan?
Is that better? Yes. First of all, thank you very much for having me here, and it is just so wonderful to see so many people that have turned out. You should applaud yourself right now. If I had seen, I probably did see about 10% of the numbers that are here right now for our first organizational meeting in West Springfield for No Casino West Springfield, which was held about 40 days before the vote. We didn't have a lot of time. You are so much farther ahead. That's so encouraging. Believe me, it is. It's huge. But there's also a lot of work to be done. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience in West Springfield. You're going to find a lot of money wandering around the town in the next 2 months. We estimate that Hard Rock International, the casino company based in the Virgin Islands, spent between $3 and $4 million in our town. That was about 200 times the $15,000 that we managed to raise. What they didn't have is what's sitting in this room. The people, the residents, the people that walked around door to door, that knocked on doors, that passed along the message, that got the rest of the town hearing the other side of the story. The other thing we didn't have was a jump. In other words, Hard Rock was in town for 6 months before we were formed. And it may not be a political decision as to where the state ends up putting a casino down the road. It certainly is a political decision, town to town, the way your town treats it. We had 9 councilors and a mayor. Our mayor became a cheerleader. 6 councilors came out in favor of the casino, and 3 others wouldn't say a word. That's what we had to be up against. Now, we also had a host agreement, which promised the mayor, the day that he signed the agreement, he would receive a check for $400,000 for the town, that would go to the town. Now, nothing comes without a little bit expectation, obviously, and they certainly delivered. Like I said, the 6 came out in favor, the mayor was a cheerleader answering questions in front of assemblies like this when Hard Rock was making presentations. So as far as the political process goes, you've got to jump on that, you're ahead of the game. It's strikingly similar, the size of our town. 28,000 residents, about 17,000 voters. I looked online and saw what Milford had here. I was literally amazed. I said, well, if we can bring some signs over, whatever we can do to help, we'll be more than happy to. I also had a chance to look at the annual report of Milford from last year. You're not that desperate. You had a solid budget last year. You've got $10 million sitting in a stabilization fund. It sounds like the town is just tremendously well organized. About 10 years ago, West Springfield changed from a town meeting form of government. I was a town meeting member back then, and we had 3 selectmen. So we come from a very, very similar history. It's amazingly similar. What else can you expect besides all the money that's going to be around here? A very sophisticated advertising campaign that's going to be run by professional organizers, campaign managers. When it started raining on election day and we were standing outside there holding our signs, a little car zips up, somebody's driving it, somebody's in the passenger seat, the window comes down, and suddenly ponchos are being thrown out to the window to all the yes signs that were sitting there in town. It's so well organized. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they went around to each of our 4 different polling places. They looked down the lists of who hadn't voted. They compared that to who they expected to vote yes, and they got on the phone and started calling them and said, how come you haven't been to the polls yet? That's literally the detail that you will run into, and the amount of money and the follow-up. So while it's very, very encouraging to see you all here tonight, you've still got a lot of work. And the work is literally going to be what we found, door to door. I mean, I would love to put Bob Steele in my pocket and walk to the next door and have him talk to somebody for the next half hour. But to be honest, it's even better if you, every one of you, go to your next door neighbor, because they know who you are and they know what your concerns are. And that's going to make the difference in this election, the people that are sitting in the room here today. What can you do? Your organizers are going to tell you that. If you've email lists, get on them. If you've got websites, click on them, because the more clicks, the higher up the ladder they go. Obviously, you're going to talk to your neighbors. If you don't feel like knocking door to door, a great way, a lot of people in our town, they just said, gee, I've got 30 friends. I'm going to take one of these flyers, I'm going to put a personal note on top and say, this is a concern of mine, Bob, Joe, whoever your friend is, mail it out. That's how the message gets around. That's how a grass organization works. Volunteer for the standouts, volunteer to make signs. Homemade signs are great. They get featured everywhere. I was talking to a Hartford Current reporter and saying, look at the line of Hard Rock Yes signs. They're all exactly identical. People know where that comes from. And if it comes out of your heart and soul and you put it on a sign, it means that much more when it shows up on the newsprint, when it shows up to your neighbors. They've got millions of dollars But again, we've got the people and the volunteers here in this room. I wouldn't bet against you. Good luck on your campaign.
We want to move along here, but is there any questions for Alan?
You're saying they have millions of dollars, but then on the other hand, they're saying it's gonna run out? Is that what you're saying? What they're promising us is not gonna happen? The money they're promising the town, are you saying it's gonna run out maybe the first year?
They have millions of dollars for an advertising
Right.
campaign versus the people you have.
But they've promised this town, millions of dollars. Are you saying that it's gonna happen just the first year and then it's gonna be gone?
No, that's what they're going to throw into the advertising campaign against you in the next 2 months.
Right, but I guess I'm talking about something else, the money that they're gonna be giving the town.
Right, they're paying real estate taxes. And to be honest, if you read the host agreement for your town, and I actually did take a peek at it, everything else is mitigation. In other words, they're admitting, yes, there are problems. We have to mitigate. You're going to have more crime. We're going to hire more police officers. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have more break-ins, more drug trafficking, everything else that comes along with the casino. They're just going to pay for it. So
Right.
all of the money that adds up, other than basically them being another taxpayer, is just to pay for the problems.
So Springfield didn't get anything done to their town with that money that they gave you, even though you didn't get the $400,000?
Oh, the $400,000 was spent. The mayor had a pet project and he bought a piece of real estate.
Well,
And then he,
I mean, my concern
Help
is
the
if we're gonna
campaign.
get the money to fix up the town and cut our taxes, then it sounds like you're saying it's not gonna happen, right? It's not gonna happen, it's a lie? It's a lie?
no,
That's what you're saying?
that's not the way it works. And I
Okay,
guess
so
Bob
it's a lie.
explained
Just
that.
tell me it's a lie, we're not gonna get our taxes cut, the town isn't gonna be fixed up, I mean, right?
The cost that will be created over time will be well in excess
Go
of
to
anything that
Connecticut,
comes
see
in.
what they're doing. All towns are ruined.
Any other questions for Alan? Any other questions? Yes, right here.
I live in a neighboring town, and I don't know whether we can do anything. I live in a neighboring town, and I'm having a bird because I don't want it. I live on Route 16, and you know what that's going to do to 16. Do the towns around us, around you, or Milford, do we have anything to say? No?
No. You have no say in this. It's really the Milford residents only have a say, and then the state.
We also had people from neighboring campaign towns helping us on our campaign. So to the extent you can help the campaign here, that's a plus.
Any other questions for Alan?
It's not a question, but for any of the residents of the surrounding towns, if you do have friends and family that is in Milford, you should reach out to them and let them know that they should not support this. So that's...
Thank you.
This is our final speaker tonight, and before I introduce him, let me just say that the most important asset we have to oppose the casino is, as he said, sitting right here. But we need desperately you to stand up and volunteer to do something. We have tables at the back of the room by precinct, and as he so well pointed out, it's neighbor to neighbor that counts, because you know each other and they trust you. And so we need somewhere around at least 100 volunteers to walk around your neighborhood, and we'll get this all organized and we'll explain more about it in a minute. But just in case someone has to leave for the kids or whatever, before you leave, please go to the back table and they will explain how you can help. And then after the last speaker, we'll explain better from the podium here. Okay? But if anybody has to leave, please stop at the back table first. Our next and our last speaker here tonight is our chairman of the Board of Selectmen, William Buckley. I spoke to Bill today, I said, how do you want me to introduce you, Bill? He said, oh, don't give me a long introduction. Just say I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. And that is so characteristic of Bill for how humble he is. But I'm going to say one thing, Bill. He's one of the most courageous men I know.
You're all very, very kind, and I appreciate that applause.
There's the mic. There's the mic.
Is this better? My children have never said that I was hard to hear. No, I appreciate the kind words from Steve, and I do appreciate that applause. I guess I'm here just to give you a little bit of perspective, at least my perspective, on the process that we used. And I'm not going to go into great detail because I think everybody knows my position from the beginning on this. And I took that position with a lot of thought. It was thought about, at least in my particular case, 5 generations of Milfordian. I couldn't find anything from the casino debate or discussion that would help the educational process. And here's a teacher here who brought up issues regarding education. I couldn't find anything within what I would consider pro-casino movement that would improve our education locally. I couldn't find anything about that process that would help our teachers. And I certainly couldn't find anything in any information that I researched that found improved educational success where casinos were present. Beyond that, I worried about the direct impact it would have on the character of our community. For the record, I'm not anti-casino. I'm pro-Milford. And, one of the previous speakers talked about the host community agreement. And he put it into 2 buckets. And it is very simple. One bucket is mitigation. That is, for all the negatives that might happen, the casino puts a bucket of funds together and says, we'll try to mitigate that. That's the upfront payments, spread out over 4 years. That was their obligation with the legislation that was created. Casinos who wanted to engage with the town had to mitigate the impact. They did the best they can by throwing money at the problem. But as the previous speaker said, there isn't any one of our public servants who are going to say that with the increased traffic, any additional accidents or any additional issues, with any increase in crime, they're going to mitigate that issue. What it means is we're going to have trained professionals that are going to be able to respond to that. We're going to have more people in cars. We're going to have trained firefighters who are able to use specialized equipment in order to mitigate that accident, traffic issue, or whatever. There's no prevention here. It's an attempt to mitigate. The second bucket of funds that they're touting is simply a tax obligation. When was the last time any one of you were congratulated for meeting your tax obligations? If they're going to build a $1 billion enterprise there, they have taxes to pay. That's where the second group of payments come in. So the speaker previous to me had aptly talked about two groups. This is a process, and I looked at this process, and I'll tell you the process I went through. I had a personal view and a personal opinion, and when the data was presented, my original opinion stuck. This isn't going to improve Milford as a community. Now, having said that, the more important aspect of that is that if it's not going to help the town, consider what the risks are. I'd ask pro-casino people to do that, and I'd ask pro-Milford people to consider that. Don't let anybody pigeonhole you into a group or a bucket that says you're anti-casino. Take the position you are pro-Milford. I see a lot of people here of various generations, young people, old people, educators, public servants. I see a lot of people here who are caring about their community. I don't see them as anti-casino anything. Steve mentioned the amount of work that there has to be done. You know, for the record, by the way, I reached out to the pro-casino movement. I said at any time, in any public forum, if there's ever my perspective that's helpful to you, I'd be happy to speak about it. But I'd encourage you to do something, and it's very important to me personally, and I hope it's important to you. It's important that we debate honestly and respectfully. It's important that when we engage our neighbors, that we do it with the consideration that they may not feel the way you feel. That's okay. That doesn't make them bad people any more than it makes you bad people. When this is all done, regardless of what the state says, whether they approve this or not, whether the referendum passes or fails, or whether planning passes and fails, we all have to live with each other. We all have to see each other at the local markets. And it's important because this issue can be very, very divisive. Take the high road always. Be honest to yourself. You have 2 campaigns in front of you left. One campaign is the referendum. And that can be won or lost with 1 vote. It is a campaign, as much as it's not political, it is a campaign. Always consider you're 1 vote behind. You need 1 more vote. And work that hard to always get that 1 more vote. The second campaign is with your precinct members. If on the long shot that this referendum passes, and I'll throw out a number for discussion, 55-45. I don't think it's going to happen, by the way. But if it were, and precinct members vote in the same proportion, representing their precincts, the way the referendum voted, it will not pass. So there are 2 aspects of this campaign that are very, very important. I would tell you, don't engage people who have already made up their mind. For people who aren't certain, talk to them. For people who have made up their mind, it's an argument waiting to happen. And frankly, it's not worth it. Find your voters, find the people who are undecided, and get the vote out for the people who are like-minded. As Marie can attest to, and as other people, John Seavers run a campaign, that is what a campaign is about. But at least be honest to yourself and be respectful to your neighbors. It's important, as chairman I had to take a lot of different roles. But one was to make sure I was chairman of the board first. The second piece was to make sure I was always honest to myself. And the third one is to make sure I was honest with you. I think I've met that obligation. And when it came to negotiations, that's when I put my personal views aside. I negotiated as hard as I possibly could, given the situation and the circumstances, to make sure if a casino came to Milford, that it received the maximum benefit. That was my job, and I would tell you now that I think I did that job. Only time will tell. So at the end of this meeting, please do sign up in your neighborhoods. Let people know where you are. Let people know what neighborhood you can represent. And be part of something that I don't know that we're going to see anything in our lifetime that will be this big. And I don't mean to be overly dramatic about it. I can tell you there's a fair amount of people who spend a lot of nights out and reading a lot of material to try to come up to speed on this process. And I was one of them. I thought I owed that to you. But moving forward, it's important that you engage your neighbors, sign up for the functions that exist back there for neighborhood support, and find those people who think like you and make sure, there's the old saying, those that show up decide. On referendum day, those that show up are going to decide this. And you're going to be amazed when you look at the voting list later and see the amount of people who did not show up. Some of them are going to be your neighbors and friends, and some of them are going to be people who committed to you. Anybody who's run for office has seen that before. You'll see it again. Make sure you get out the vote, make sure you organize. This is a David and Goliath scenario. You heard the previous speakers talk about the amount of money that's going to be injected into this community to sway the vote. They'll be very, very organized. They'll have people calling. And they won't call just anybody. It won't be random. They'll be calling the people they've identified as pro-casino. They'll put unlimited resources on it. You'll see an enormous amount of vehicles election day driving people to the polls. But the thing I have to give all of you credit here for, the one thing that stands out in my mind, each of you bought your own signs. Nobody bought those signs for you. Those signs are going to pop up, and they're going to pop up a lot of places. As a matter of fact, you're going to see them pop up on rental places more often than not. And that's in part because the landlord wants the sign there, not the people that are necessarily living there or voting there. And if you count it, look at the people who bought signs that don't want a casino, and then look at the people who place signs that are pro-casino. So good luck to all of you. And I've made myself available by email, telephone. I've tried to answer your calls, emails. I haven't always done that and responded as well as I'd like, but I do try. So good luck. I think you have two great co-chairs who are clearly committed to this community, and I think Steve and John deserve a round of applause.